Good evening. Will the Wadsworth Public Service Committee meeting for Monday, October the 21st, 2024, please come to order. Time is 5:30 p.m. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our September the 16th meeting. Were there any changes or anything to those? I'll entertain a motion to...
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Signify, or same sign, negative, all right. Those minutes have been approved. There, okay. Next item is public participation, seeing none. Next item, item number 3, are project updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be quick because I know we got to talk budget tonight, but feel free to interrupt with questions as you have them. We're wrapping up a lot of our water projects for the year. First one is the water treatment plant improvement projects, phase 1. That contract's still open, but we're just working on some closeout items with the contractor, nothing substantial there. The water treatment plant demonstration project, we're working on that plan with the consultant to send over to the EPA. And then Tolbert Street improvement project, we have final plans in hand, and we're just working on kind of our last check to make sure everything's good on that. That one is in next year's budget, I know, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that. Water system looping project, we also have final plans on that project, but it's also not budgeted until next year, so nothing on that project. And then the Bird Street PRV, their final plans are due at the end of this month, but again, not budgeted for construction until next year. So that is all the updates I have on water. Did you guys have any questions?
No, we don't.
No, we're good. Thank you, appreciate that.
Yep.
Did you want to go ahead and just
I
write
can
down the
do
list there? Go ahead.
First project, the SSO4 manhole installation and SSO5 weir wall. We did get quotes on that project. We got, I believe, 5 quotes, and we were able to award that. So we're working on getting the PO set up and the contract signed and everything for that to be constructed this year. So that's good news. And then the 2024 sanitary sewer lining project. We have our pre-construction meeting tomorrow. We're still waiting on the contractor's schedule, but I'm guessing they'll be starting here shortly once we have that pre-construction meeting. And they have until the end of January, weather permitting, to do that work. And then the SSO program update, I know we kind of always just keep having that on there, but there's really not much update on that. The EPA is working on their end to incorporate that into Christie's permit. So that is all I have for wastewater updates. Any questions?
No, nothing back yet from the EPA, is what you're saying,
On the
SSO.
SSO program, correct.
Okay.
They did acknowledge that they received our 15-year CIP and they would incorporate it, but that's the extent of it.
Thank you.
Right. All right. Move on then to stormwater update. I know there was a meeting just prior to this one.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had our second Stormwater Commission meeting of the year. We're going to meet quarterly. Meetings will typically be before a public service meeting. So our next meeting on our regular schedule would fall on the Martin Luther King holiday in January. So the commission will meet at whatever date the Public Service Committee chooses for their meeting. Basically, we've started out with some good ideas, and I think the direction that we're going to be moving in will be further developing the stormwater capital improvement plan. One of the things that I shared with commission members is, of our utilities, we have probably a less sophisticated capital improvement plan for stormwater. So our water items, our sanitary sewer items, electric, telecom, we have a much more comprehensive capital improvement plan. So we've been working towards building that into the stormwater piece of things. So that's something that will pick up steam as we progress over the next few months. As part of that, the commission chairman is interested in potentially adjusting the stormwater rate. So there was some talk about what we need to do in order to have the information we need to determine what is an appropriate rate. So one piece of that is the capital improvement plan for the stormwater stuff. The second piece of that is really updating and making sure our impervious surface area maps are accurate. Glenn shared tonight that, we've got a relatively unautomated system of almost, hand-drawn marking. So, there's some room that we can introduce some technology here and I think really bring things up to date. It's been a while since we looked at any of these items. The rates, as far as I can tell, are at least 10 years old. And it probably is true that some type of rate adjustments warranted, not just because of the introduction of the capital improvement plan, but just because costs have increased and normal inflationary pressures over the last several years. So I anticipate that when we meet for our first time in 2025, that these items will be ongoing agenda items. Also, one of the items that we'll be discussing is the dry basement program. So it doesn't sound like we've had a lot of applications recently, and meaning in the last few years, at least since I've been here, I can only remember receiving one call, which we referred to engineering, and engineering's not received a lot of calls. Glenn has some ideas of some things that we can look at, possibly addressing the scope of the program, but he said, hey, there's some things in there that may make it harder than it needs to be for someone to file an application, and maybe there's some things that we can do differently that would encourage people to file the applications. And then, once we've kind of figured out what is the appropriate scope and what are some things that we can do to change this, it's worth bringing that back into the public's eye. So that could be social media posts, prominent location on our website, just getting the word out that that program is around. So it's kind of difficult with the information we have now to know, did we solve everything, or is it just a matter that people have kind of forgotten about the program, and that's a big reason why applications are down. But I see that being an agenda item as we move into 2025, and I think throughout 2025, probably the successful completion of the capital improvement plan, of whatever we're going to do with rates, of the updating the maps and all of that, I would expect that we would complete that in the next calendar year.
Yeah, those rates, the $4.50 residential rate, that was actually implemented when the committee was formed back in 2004. So that part has never been raised. So yeah, those are old. And initially, when the commission was started, you talked about educating the public. I know we had a public meeting here, and engineering went through some of the different things that causes that, and that explained to the public whether it was going to be their cost or the city cost, depending upon what the problem was. So, right. Anything else on stormwater then? All right, you would fiber update.
Yep, so the fiber project continues to go well. We've completed about 200 installations at this point. And what's notable about that is that one of our 4 installers has had some health issues and really has not been in the field making installations since really about the beginning of August. So the rest of the guys have really stepped up. We have also just picked a new person to join the team, so that person will be starting shortly. And we really are now on pace to do approximately 50 installations a week. We're making our way through our first underground development in Weatherstone. By the end of this week, everybody in there will have been converted over to the wireless solution. So if you remember, with the underground neighborhoods, we're going to take people that are, have service now. We're going to move them to a wireless setup to give ourselves a little bit of time to pull out the old cabling, put in the new fiber, and then switch them back onto our regular fiber system. Most of the folks in there now have been successfully moved over to the wire system, or wireless system, and that is working very well. Still a couple folks that we're trying to get a hold of to get a call back from them to switch them over. But the nice thing about the underground developments is that it's kind of an en masse conversion. So, when we put everybody in the wireless, a lot of the work that's being done, it's taking time. When that work is done, it's, everybody on that length of the line can be converted over almost at once. So it's
not have correct judgment in traffic
So folks will be able, kind of an en masse, so you won't have to do the installations one at a time as much as really just configuring, what needs to be done and then moving everybody back onto the fiber at one time. So it's going well. We're up to speed. We're going to have new staff members starting. So the project continues to go well.
Good. Any questions from anyone? All right. Next up, under electric, I know you have a quick update on the EV charging station on that rate analysis.
Yep, so we had talked about at our last meeting putting together some kind of a rate analysis, and the piece that was missing was some type of usage statistics that we could use to determine, what any costs associated with, maintaining the system, what's the denominator they would be spread over. I got a little bit of information from the manufacturer, but not a lot. But NOACA has specifically scheduled a conference meeting that will address this. So on November 7th, I'll be attending a meeting where they have asked everybody that has gotten stations and has turned them on for usage data and the rate data and kind of the how they have reconciled those two. So what I'm anticipating is that after attending that meeting, I'm going to have really all kinds of usage information that's relevant to our area. And then based on what I know the committee's preferences are, work up kind of a menu, if you will, of all the various cost variables that could be built into a rate and, be able to show that if we were to, include this cost in there, this is what the impact would have on the rate at this usage level. And be able to break that down really in kind of a 66 in separate buckets, so to speak, so we can determine what exactly we want, what costs we want to be covered by the rate that we ultimately adopt.
Okay. All right, thank you. And when you do that, if you could look at it, I know we had originally talked about a 10-year. Let's also look at it just over a 5-year, like over the warranty area too. Let's get those divisions up there over 2 different time frames.
Yep.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry. Any questions?
No.
All right. Next item then is the. I don't know. I mean, you sent it out to everybody, the electric department and CityLink subscriber updates. Is there anything, or just?
There's not.
If I can interject, just for the committee's information, I have locked the doors to chambers right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if we have a public participant that needs to come in the room, I will allow them in the room.
All right. Thank you. All right. Did you want to go over anything, or just?
No. Just
right.
wanted to make you aware that it's there. That's all.
Okay. Anybody from the committee want to make a comment on this? Okay. All right, then next item on here, and that's what we've been waiting for here, is the budget. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The plan is to go through the capital budget expenses. In your budget books, it's listed as the capital items, and it's basically starting, I think, on page 186 is the introduction to this section of the book. And what I thought we'd do is go through it in a similar manner to how we went through the public ways capital items, and it's really kind of aligned with how we've done service in the past as well. I will go through the 9 pages of capital items, and I'm just going to cherry pick a handful of items to speak about, and then I would invite committee members to ask any questions that they have about any of the items. And I'll point out that, this has everything from a capital standpoint in there sorted by, sequentially by the fund number. But a lot of these items will be addressed in the safety committee reviews of police and fire. A lot of the items in here have already been addressed at public ways, and then really a big chunk of the items in here we've already had a special public service committee meeting on to go over, in particular, the water and sanitary sewer items. So I'll try to hit items that we've not covered in one of those other arenas. And I'll also mention there are some larger projects. Matt passed out a set of charts on various projects. These are charts that relate to specific expenses for 25 and 26. And beyond just answering questions about our general items, Matt will speak in a little bit more detail about these projects and explain those a little bit more. First thing that I would like to point out is under the 213 fund WCTV, and the item is AV upgrades for council chambers, AV for audio visual upgrades. The dollar amount is $30,000. I'll also say that in the IT operating budget, we have about another $15,000 that would be added to this. And what this is for is really updating the projector so we have a sharper, clearer image on the screen. Problem is, when we update the projector, we also need to update the TriCaster. So the TriCaster is basically the piece of equipment that allows the camera operator to shuffle different views to different cameras. So if somebody's speaking up there, the camera's on them. If somebody's speaking over here, a different camera is switched to. And unfortunately, a high-definition projector won't work with our existing TriCaster because it doesn't have an input for high-definition stuff. So part of it is the new projector, and that's probably somewhere in the $13,000 to $15,000 range. Probably about $9,000 for the new TriCaster, the switching piece. But when we upgrade the TriCaster, we also need to upgrade the 3 cameras that we have in here. So we have a camera in this corner, a camera by the wall switch, the light switch, and then one in the back here. So we would be upgrading those cameras and actually adding a 4th camera. The new cameras would, of course, work with the new projector and the new TriCaster. The 4th camera would also be located in the southwest corner, but it would basically be set on kind of a permanent wide view, so we'd always have a shot of all of council that could be mixed in without having to just rely on different zoom levels or one of these cameras. Beyond those pieces, there's also a couple other pieces in there. There'd be a remote control for all of the equipment. There'd also be an app that would allow someone that's sitting in here, sitting in kind of the audience area, to be able to view on their phone something that might be displayed on the screen, so they don't have to kind of try to squint and see what's up here. They don't have to crane their necks to see what's there. But also with all of this, we'll be able to capture what's on the screen and share that on the recording that the folks at home are seeing. So they won't have to just hear us talk while we're all looking at that. They'll be able to see that as well as we're talking about it. So that's an item that we've planned for next year.
Mr. Testa, that sounds pretty reasonable. Is it, and with all those features, is that something that's going to take us, 5-10 years down the road, as everything technology advances?
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that we'd look at. This would be something that we would not be able to do in-house with our communication guys or with WCTV, so we'd have to bring in audio, video expert. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do, is build in something that's got the specifications and the capabilities to serve us for a long time. And it really, we thought about doing something this year. We wanted to try installing another set of blinds on the windows behind us, in the hopes that might allow us to kind of block out some of the sun. And if it were a little bit darker in here, maybe the screen would be a little bit clearer. And we've tried that, and it's helped some, but not to the extent that I think we could use. I'll also mention, although I won't go into any detail, in 232 you see municipal court improvements. These are items that are typically requested by the judge. We don't do a lot to vet those, but you'll see a handful of items there that they're planning in the courts for 2025. And of course, they're using their own funds for that. I'll also point out, if you go down to Fund 239 and even 240 there, this is the motor vehicle license tax and the state highway funds. You'll see that really we've got 4 items that just say miscellaneous, either professional services or capital items. These are typically items that are budgeted really by the engineering department for small amounts of consulting work or engineering work that might need to be done in conjunction with different projects. So for example, account 53195001, that's actually related to miscellaneous engineering and inspection services. 04, I think, is related to capital design services. 550602, that's really related to street infrastructure, those type of things. I point that out only because it looks like, hey, there's a lot of miscellaneous items here that aren't described, but there's kind of catch-alls for small consulting projects or needs that relate to various capital projects throughout the year. One item I'll mention under the Fund 248, the ARPA fund, and it's not in 2025, it's this year. We are expecting to go over our final training tomorrow with the Gardner Company, so that will mark, for the most part, the successful completion of the upgrade to City Hall's HVAC system. So our system, as you may remember, was largely original to the building. It's 25 years old. We were having a lot of problems in, one half of the building really wasn't heating and cooling as well as the other half. We were continually having to call maintenance folks out to look at that. We installed a new system, an open source system, and along with that work, they also really looked at and repaired a lot of other parts in the system. The control system out within the building network itself, and then the training that we'll go over tomorrow is really the custom software solution that they've put together that will allow us to control that system. For example, several of us up in the admin offices will be able to go in there and look at certain areas and adjust those individual areas within the building if someone is having a problem with that. So I just wanted to say that this has been a kind of a long time coming. We actually started talking about this back in 2022. There was a fairly lengthy lead time on getting some of the equipment, and then the project's taken a little bit longer than we had hoped it would. But other than a couple minor punch list items, really tomorrow will mark the end of all of the kind of new work being done. If we move on to the second page.
How much do we have left in the ARPA funds?
Well, I think we're going to be out of, I have used all of that by the end of this year.
The end of this year?
Yeah, so.
That was a rule, I thought we had 2 weeks.
It had to be, yeah, spent or at least obligated by the end of this year.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
So when we move to the next page, under the 255 fund, I'll point out Freed playground improvements, and we have $70,000 in there, and I'll kind of turn it over to Matt here because Freed Park improvements are one of the items that's detailed a little bit in the front page of your charts here. It's the bottom of the 2 charts. And, well, we've got $70,000 here. This is just really one funding source that's contributing to the overall expected cost of this project, which is about $1,970,000. And I'll let Matt talk a little bit more about what's included in that and kind of what the expectations are.
Thank you, Mike. Members of the committee, so just just a quick recap. So the document that I handed out earlier before our meeting began was something that I thought might be helpful based upon some of the questions we're fielding from members of council, some of the discussions we've had in previous meetings. The reason why I thought it was good for this committee to have is because I think a majority of these projects that are listed here have elements of public service in them, and rather large elements in terms of cost factors. in terms of utility-related items to the project. So in Freed Park, for instance, Freed Park, if you know now, does not have utilities to an area where there might be a restroom, for instance. So a restroom is proposed in the Freed Park improvement plan, so we would need to run utilities, obviously, to the location of that particular restroom as part of this particular project. In addition, those types of investments allow us to tap into different sources of revenue. And so really what you have before you is pie charts that describe the revenue sources as proposed in the budget for each one of these particular projects. Freed Park, as Mike indicated, is the lower part of page 1 there. The pie chart contains the same information as the table below it. Just by way of quick definition for you, GO stands for General Obligation Debt. General obligation debt is really debt funded by the general fund and or income tax dollars, which sometimes in the debt world or discussion act synonymously with each other in terms of either general fund or income tax related items. The rest, you can see the breakout between the different utility funds, and then we have a general category, which you'll see in some of the projects that I will loosely define as grants, but there are state dollar grants. These are primarily the grants in many of the projects that we have referred to in other committee meetings as the ODNR grants, or things that were part of a state capital budget item, and we were given essentially 2.5 years to begin work or complete work on those particular projects. So that's why many of these things need to show some semblance of getting started, if you will. There is another project we'll talk about a little bit later, the Brickyard Development Project, where you'll see a private grant identified in that. That's really a donation, if you're familiar with, from a trust that we're hoping to capitalize on in that particular grant project. And then finally, in other projects, there's a state grant identifier for the one-time strategic grant dollars that were awarded to the city, in particular for the Brickyard project. So those are all wrapped into, if you will, some of the grant categories, both on the pie chart and in the tables. In terms of Freed Park improvements, I spoke a lot about it at Public Ways when we discussed park projects, but for the committee, I'll go relatively quick for you. That particular improvement is something that we would like to invest in based upon the earlier than anticipated decommissioning of the Memorial Park field, if you will, for the improvements going on out at Memorial Park right now. We basically went and eliminated a couple of leagues that used the Memorial Park field, leagues that were less than happy with that decision to close that field early and really need a home. In addition, we're looking for a home for Wadsworth Youth Lacrosse, which has not had a home to date. And so we're hoping to install a turf field at Freed Park, and a turf field which has some lighting. In addition, that turf field, our hope would have a large enough outfield and portion of the infield which would allow for regulation lacrosse related activities too. That field would also be able to be used by youth baseball and youth softball, just as the Memorial Field was used. So it would be a truly multi-purpose field. And since we're down one field, we need to move relatively expeditiously in that particular area. We would like to we saved the lights from Memorial Field, so we'd like to reinstall those particular lights out at Freed Park if the proposal is approved. And then the additional improvements to Freed Park would include a restroom, as I referenced, the utilities to that restroom. Parking lot improvements. If you're familiar with Freed Park's parking lot, it's pretty rough. We'd like to improve that parking lot as much as possible. And then update the basketball court, probably relocate it and update it to maybe 2 half courts, if you will, side by side, and do that. If budget allows, in this particular number, we would like to also contemplate a walking path that would go around the new field, if you will, on that particular premise, and or if you're familiar, there's a sleigh riding hill that's pretty popular at Freed Park, maybe what I would call a plaza at the top of that hill, so it has some seating areas, some places for folks to gather during that particular activity. Again, those are things that were identified in the master planning document, but not necessarily are we certain that it'd be affordable within our $1.9 million budget. But that's a brief overview of the project.
And were both of these fields something that were going to be located somewhere else and not in the Brickyard? I mean, I know the Brickyard's down the road, and we closed the field early, I understand that. Were these fields going to be out there, or were they originally intended to be moved somewhere else, not on the Brickyard property?
So there's only one field at Freed, so I make sure that I clarify
Okay, right,
that. It'll be
okay.
one new field, just a larger field, if you will. And no, this particular field, while ultimately, if you looked at the Brickyard from a three-phase approach where you have in excess of perhaps 12 or more fields, that field could have been placed out there, but
That's way down the road.
it was way down the road and not something that's even proposed in the current phasing of the Brickyard project.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I have for Freed Park.
Okay.
Thank you. Further down on that page, there's an item under the 425 fund, in particular under department number 3100, and it is the stump grinder with tracks. Mr. Copley, I know you had asked about a stump grinder that we had purchased for use with the skid steer in 2020, and asked what the need was or how this would be different. And I'll just share for the full committee's benefit that our parks guys are saying that's fine and it's still in use and it's great for certain types of trees, but the reality of it is a new stump grinder that can handle larger trees and can remove the stumps much more quickly. So, maybe a smaller stump that might take an hour with our existing grinder, the new grinder would allow them to complete that in maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And we're also doing things, there's a greater quantity of stumps that we're dealing with. So as we move into the sidewalk projects, as we make a more comprehensive effort on cleaning up the parks, there's a lot of tree work to be done. So there's really a need for something that can handle different types of work and that can be used in addition to the one that we have now, just to handle the larger quantity of items that need to be ground.
Mr. Testa, we'll also do the tree roots that are above ground that are not,
That's correct. Yes. You're asking me, will it?
No,
Or-
it will.
Yes,
Will,
yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. If we move to the next page, and I'll let Matt talk about this too, you'll see that we have an item still within the 425 fund that refers to the downtown improvement project, and in particular, this particular line item, about $1.5 million, really relates to work being done in 2025, which is design work specific to the downtown improvement project, and I will let Matt talk to that, but the downtown improvement project, we've included two charts in here. One relates to the design work, which would be slated for 2025. The second one relates to construction work, which would be slated for 2026. And the charts look similar, although the dollar amounts are different, largely because the way that the design costs were apportioned was largely based on how the construction costs were apportioned. So, for example, if 10% of the construction related to water funds, then 10% of the design costs would also be paid for by water funds.
Thank you, Mike. So this is directing you to page 5 of the handout for tonight. That's where you'll find the downtown improvement project. And again, I think it's important to note, while we have a large number in total project costs, the 25 budget proposal is only for design of that particular project. In 25, with construction beginning in 26, I think it would be safe to assume that if all goes as well, the construction phase will probably take more than 12 months in our anticipation. In addition, if there are phasing, which will allow for the project to be as less impactful to downtown businesses as possible. It might even extend out past 26, 27 a little bit, but that's all to be determined later in the process, I would say. So 25's design phase, if you will, again, kind of similar to Freed Park, split out for you so you can exactly see where the funding sources are anticipated from, with a total design for downtown cost, project cost of about $3.1 million, again with GO debt standing for general obligation debt of the general fund, spreading some of the other costs of that project, again, which I would tell you is primarily a utility project. I know we've talked a little bit about streetscapes and some of the concerns and questions and issues with streetscape, but if you think about it as a utility project, first and foremost, the real issue that we're hoping to solve with the project, perfect committee discussion for us here tonight. So 3.1 in terms of downtown improvement design phase in 25, and then you see the much more costly aspect of the project, the construction phase of about 16.7 as proposed in 2026 and beyond. I would tell you that we look at many different sources for this particular project. We understand that there are many questions that abound by the particular project in terms of how we are least impactful to businesses in that area. But I think an overarching issue and concern that I would tell you is we know we are working on borrowed time with those particular utilities. We're also concerned with the high side, low side water feature concerns in terms of a major break or fire related issue where we're draining towers and having concerns in the downtown area. So I think it's time. I think in separate conversations with many council folks, I think everybody is unified that there are concerns and we want to do the work. I think in order to get started to do the work, we need to design the work and go from there. I think there are also aspects that we've talked about in other meetings where we know we're going to dig up the underground and replace the underground. It makes sense to try to address and improve, if possible, the above ground features, the streetscape. So that's where the streetscape comes into this particular project. It only makes sense for us to do that. Again, I would tell you that not wanting to dwell on some of the information and concerns and discourse that happened during the last proposal of this particular project, I think we learned quite a bit as a city from those discussions, and we can take away a lot of information that has been done by city architecture already. We can also improve upon some of those aspects. We can also change some of those aspects, but there is a body of work that's not so old that we can tap into and use as a base to begin the process of design and discussion. I think it's important to update our discussion with our community and hear from our community, and we're ready, willing, and able to do that. And I think it's an opportunity to get started in 2025, and I'd ask you to consider doing that at this point.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're going to use a previous plan to design this project?
No, we want to use parts of those previous plans to start the discussion about what direction to go. So we don't have to use those plans in their entirety, although we believe there's lots of good ideas and information in there. But we also know there were aspects of those plans that were not popular and were not perhaps the best. But we think rather than starting from square one, if you will, we have some of that information, and if we could start, there were multiple plans that were presented. If we can start with all of those multiple plans, and maybe two were the rose to the top as viable options, and look at those and have discussions, whether it be internally or externally or both, as a starting point, and then see where we go in terms of a design, and then actually get design documents, completed in 25 so that we could get started in 26, perhaps.
But your intent is to have public meetings and that kind of stuff
Yeah.
prior to any design work being done?
Yeah, I think we understand that there needs to be an engagement process where people are a part of that in our community. Business owners are a part of that, citizens are a part of that, council is part of that, administration is part of that. So we just thought if we start from square one, we'll probably, or from square zero without using those plans, we're probably going to incorporate many of those things that were already known to us from that. But we also know it's been a couple years, and there's new owners, new property owners, new people in town, folks with perhaps different opinions or insights, and we want to make sure we tap into that before we say go with a particular design or anything of that nature.
Now you're going to ask us for the 3.1 million or approximately for this capital budget we're going to approve in December. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm a little bit concerned about not having the communication in a plan, or if it's phased or not, those type of things, even though you're saying it, but that'll relieve tensions of the community itself. Needing to know how to plan, what the plans are, and from the ones I've talked to, communication was the number one issue so they can plan. The destination type of stores did not worry as much as those with walk-up. Those with walk-up were very fearful. So they're going to need some reassurance, and they're going to want to ask questions about that. Sure. But that's the basic. There was a couple that were positive that had been through that in Worcester and Massillon, and when they worked for others, and they said on the flip side, when they came out, they were very happy with it. So if you can survive the short term, it's a good thing. So that was just a couple, but they'd been through it, so they understood. So those are kind of questions that are going to be asked.
Sure. I think those are all excellent points and things that we need to be prepared to either address or do further research and look into. Mm-hmm. I would say, and I'd ask perhaps Gina to weigh in, I would find it hard pressed that a good construction plan would close all 4 quadrants of the square down at once without some type of phasing. That was what I was referring to when I said phased approach to the construction. You know, maybe it's a certain quadrant or a certain leg of downtown that is determined on what to do first or what to do second or third or fourth, if you will, on those. But with that, there's also in any phased construction project a concern about, boy, the project just continues on and on and on and on. And so I don't have enough information. I don't think any of us have enough information tonight to tell you, oh, it's definitely going to be a 3-phased approach, and these are the quadrants that are going to go first, second, or third, or is it going to be 4 phases or not? I think that's part of what we do once we get a design and engage either a construction manager or whatever project delivery model we choose to go with. That's going to be of big concern, and would have had some public sessions and input as to issues and concerns. We'll have our own team looking at it internally, and that way we can make the best decisions as to that construction phasing aspect at that point in time.
Again, my concern is if we approve this 3.1 million, basically we're saying we're going forward. I mean, and we're committing the rest of the money without an end plan or total. So as much as that information as we can possibly get. Now, when you do construction, you could have delays of 6 months because of unforeseen things, or longer. And so, but a general idea of how to proceed before we, and so the residents and the commercial buildings could have a good aspect so they feel better about it.
We could certainly try to do that, and again, I would differ slightly in your interpretation, Mr. Barish. All you're really committing to is design. If that design is delayed, what happens is costs probably increase, right. But you do have the ability to take a step back after that design and decide, well, I want a phased approach, I don't want a phased approach, those kind of things. Those are really construction implementation and project management aspects. But the 3.1 is a commitment to come up with a design and a commitment to engage our community, engage stakeholders, make a decision on direction, and get going. I think our concern is we'd like that to follow closely with the construction project because, again, I think we're very concerned about the utility aspects of the downtown area and some of the impacts that downtown area have on other parts of our systems.
When were you planning on the possibility of a new water tower to increase the low side water? I mean, how many years away was that? Because when that happens, of course, water mains are going to start popping everywhere.
Yeah, so the PRV valve that we've talked about is going to give us a little bit of time, but I think we do have a new tower in the budget for
27. I think
Seven?
it was 27 or 28.
It was
Yeah.
later on,
It's in
yeah.
the CIP plan.
And so
yeah.
that affects us too. We need to have that moving forward, else it's going to be, yeah, there's going to be geysers.
Yeah, when you have older systems that feed newer towers and different pressures, that can be, I'm not going to sit here and act engineer, Gina does that for me, that can be a recipe for,
Yes.
for additional breaks.
Okay.
Mr. Hiscock?
Yep.
So are we, from the discussion, it sounds like we're going to use the same design firm as we did several years ago? Is that the intent?
Well, I don't want to say that we're going, that was City Architecture, if you remember the name. I'm not here telling you that that's who we're going to use.
Okay.
I would tell you that I would hope, as if we move forward with the design in '25, that we use some of the work product that City Architecture came up with as a starting point for us. That's all. I just, there's a lot of information there. There's some concepts and designs there. There was some positive feedback, along with some discourse about those designs.
A lot of discourse. A lot of discourse.
Something to start with. And that was, I think, on one design. There was another one that
Because they
didn't
provided
have-
three, I believe.
There
right?
was, I think
three.
there was
Different
four,
plans.
actually, that
Four,
came out.
okay.
Yeah, so there were a couple that, I'll just be frank, did not move the gazebo, and what about that information, and where do we go? You know, so I guess, Mr. Williams, to tell you, I'm not committed today to City Architecture, but I think it would be a mistake for us not to use what we have in-house already. That information is not that old. Those concepts are not that out of date in terms of some of the items on it, and we can improve or change those things and go that route. We would need to hire a design professional through this process, and that's part of the 3.1 million in the proposal. So no, City Architecture is not who I'm telling you we're going to work with, but there is information in their ideas that we can probably take, hand off to them if they're the selected entity, or what other entity, and use some of that information. It would just put us ahead in the design process than having to have you know, a number of charrettes with the public and different presentations and rehash some of the information that we already have in-house on some of those items. We do need to get new and updated information. I am saying that again. I think that's important in this process, but no, we're not. I'm not sitting here telling you that we're committed to City Architecture, but there is some information that they provided that we own as work product that we can use moving forward.
Thank you.
I think that's everything I have on the downtown project.
Further down on that same page, in the 431 Park Improvements Fund, I'll bring your attention to the last two rows in Fund 431. The Brickyard Phase 1, both construction and design, planned for 2025. And again, this is a big project. It is also the project that is shown first on top of page 1 of your charts. And again, this is one that has a lot of pieces, parts, so I'll let Matt just provide additional details on this.
Thank you, Mike. Members of the committee, again, why are we talking about a park project at public service? Because really, the vast majority of the cost of the Brickyard development project is married to utility work. And quite honestly, the $12 million price tag in your proposed budget is a large one. So the more committees we can talk about the project in, the better off I think we will be in terms of a thorough discussion and determination on what direction to go. Before I forget, the proposal for the Brickyard is what I would call Phase 1, and it is for the design and beginning of construction in 25, and we know it won't be completed in 25, so it will continue on through 26 if we move forward. What does Phase 1 include? So if you recall the master park plan, I think we had some very aspirational and good goals in terms of what was described in that master parks plan document. But it included up to 12 athletic fields, if you will. It included pickleball courts and some tennis courts. It included a wide array of parking facilities out at the complex. It included a walking trail, and even at different points had photos and thoughts about what was referred to as a lodge, if you will, out there. And then it also had discussions about the more natural part of the park, which would be more of a walking or biking trail aspect of the park. Phase one, first and foremost, I know $12 million is a large number in our budget, but we've dialed that initial idea way back. It includes 4 ball fields, 4 turf ball fields. It includes a restroom facility. It includes the utility work to the park, the initial part of the park, if you will. It includes parking lots, those kind of works. It includes the trail around the pond area, and then improvements to the biking area and the walking area and the natural side. It includes 2 trailheads, if you will, for the natural side of the park, both which would include restroom facilities there. And then it includes a playground equipment, if you will, in that area generally. It does not include the pickleball courts. It does not include tennis courts initially. It does not include fields 5 through 12, if you will. Those would have to come, if they come at all, at some later point in time. So we're already sort of dialing back from the initial master plan document and concept to what we believed was a little bit more reasonable at the first steps, if you will. Saying that, $12 million is a large item in any budget. Certainly our budget, it is a predominant expense in the 25 proposed budget. Important to talk a little bit about funding. I think we have, as you can see in the pie chart, about 28% of that 12 million is funding that comes from outside city coffers. Again, this is the one-time strategic grant dollars in the amount of 2.5 million, which we've already been awarded by the state of Ohio. And then the 900,000, which comes from the Fixler Family Foundation upon substantial completion of the natural aspects of the park, if you will. And then the remaining costs would come quite a bit, again, coming from utility funds, that being water, sewer, and electric for the utilities that'll need to get back into the park proper, if you will. And then about $3 million coming from general fund transfer dollars. So again, an array and a purposeful spread of funding related sources to make the project, quite honestly, more doable from a funding standpoint. And we believe that this is a good formula to get us there, at least to phase one. I would tell you that I'm interested in the feedback, and I'm interested in thoughts on phase one and where we go. I know that there's been, I've been approached by certain council folks about concerns about debt issuance and revenue streams, and those are excellent questions and good questions that I'm ready, willing, and able to weigh in on. I think it's also important that Ms. Fix have an opportunity to give council her opinions on different things, but this is something that when you look at the overall capacity of the city, I believe the time is right to invest in this infrastructure. You know, council, I think, did something great for our community when we purchased that land. We purchased that land with intent to create a park. And I think we went through a process of looking into private partners for the development of the park. We looked into the economic driver potential of the park. And while a master park that included 12 fields and those types of things is certainly an advantage and an enhancement, I think we realized that we probably weren't of the magnitude and didn't have the right private partners to get that all done in one fell swoop. So we needed to dial back perhaps some of our expectations, but still deliver for our community and the folks who would use this particular public asset. So 12 million, a lot of dollars. I've said it again. I'll continue to say that. But we have almost 28% of it coming from outside sources, which a portion of that has a timeline that is important to.
What is the timeline for that grant?
So if you look strictly at the one-time strategic grant agreements, they say for completion by the end of '26. However, as with any state dollars, if you show that you have and or are making substantial improvements and are on your way, it's usually a matter of talking with our folks at the state level and making sure they understand that we're moving forward on a project and we've shown substantial actions towards that particular project, that you can get additional time to complete the project. But that means we need to get going in some format or some shape. And a design helps us down that road, but they love to see sort of buckets in the ground and real work happening for commitments in those regards. But I would not be surprised if we don't see those dollars, funding dollars. The one-time strategic pool of money is a little bit different than traditional grant funding coming from the state, where they hold on to it until you show certain aspects of completion and then they send it to you. The one-time strategic funds, the Office of Budget Management is really trying to push those dollars out in anticipation of projects. So I think we'll see the 2.5 million relatively soon coming to the city. So that's another aspect of why I thought it was important to at least propose this project and get the temperature of council as to what direction we wanted to go and when we wanted to get going. So we included it in that process.
I have one more question
Yeah.
too. Have we got a drive easement worked out yet?
We do not. We do own land that abuts Seville Road, and
Right.
that was the initial idea in terms of the drive that comes in. We
That's
have
not
that.
good, yeah.
It's not perfect. I would agree with you, Mr. Copley. It would be our preference to try to work something out with St. Ed's to get really a dedicated roadway that would be the city's off Main Street or 94, if you will. But that has not come to fruition yet. We continue to have discussions. I think we need to increase the tenor of our discussions in those.
Because I'll just be upfront with you. I have problems committing $12 million or something that we don't even have a good access point to. I mean, because that driveway is going to dictate where some of the fields are and that kind of stuff.
It absolutely will dictate layout and those kind of things, and that's why we started early in those discussions with our neighbor. I wish we wouldn't even be talking about that issue right now, but obviously we don't control how they have been moving forward. I will tell you, we have a meeting set up with them in the coming weeks, so I'm hopeful that we will have
And that's why I
progress.
asked about the timeline on that grant.
Yeah, we
you know.
continue to push for acquiring the property that we need to acquire there, or at least the rights to a dedicated roadway.
I mean, because I honestly feel we're putting the cart before the horse here. I mean, because Seville Road's not a good access point.
It has its challenges.
It's got a lot of challenge with the hills and, you know, that sight distances and stuff like that there. 94 is a much better.
Well, I will tell you that I don't disagree with that from an opinion standpoint. I know that if we were to use the Seville Road access, and we probably would still build that at some point in time because we want multiple ways
Right.
back into the Brickyard.
Yeah, for traffic.
It does
Makes sense.
meet any traffic requirements that we might have if we were to build an intersection there. It's just not preferential as the primary point of entry, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's without a formal traffic study or anything weighing in. But I think from anyone who drives Seville Road and knows where that point of access might be, it's doable, but not ideal.
It's not ideal.
Yeah, so. Well, I would tell you, despite that, I think if we were able to have some direction on where we wanted to go with this, you know, we have spent the money and purchased the property already. We do know that some of our other park projects are dependent upon at least the beginning phases of this work getting completed and done out at the Brickyard, it will allow us to continue to make improvements to some of the other city parks once we're able to sort of decommission some fields and move those athletic events out to the Brickyard. It just puts a lot of things in motion if we get started with the Brickyard. I think another area that I'd like to spend some time on, I don't know if now's appropriate or if you want to get through all of that, is talking about some of the debt issuance concerns and an income tax revenue analysis discussion, if you will. And I have some of that information to provide you tonight, but it might be better off towards the end of our meeting so you can get through the rest of the budget items, or I can move into that now, whatever the committee may feel is appropriate.
You want to do it now?
Sure.
While we're on the subject, go ahead.
Absolutely. So some of this is general, because I know we have lots of capital projects involved. So I just wanted to sort of give you, again, my take, and I'm not speaking for Ms. Fix here, but I'm using a lot of the information and documents that come out of our financial and finance division and our financial analysis and reports that are shared with council, I know, on a monthly basis. So the first and foremost concern that I've heard is, do we really have enough debt capacity to take on all of these projects that are proposed in 25? And in short order, I would tell you we do, if you look at it from a debt capacity standpoint. Right now in 24, we are using about 17.5% of the city's debt capacity on general obligation debt projects. In 25, including not only the projects we're talking about here, but the projects that are involved in water and sanitary, some of those heavy lifts, all of the proposed projects with all of the different debt factored in, we would only be using about 21.6% of the city's debt capacity. So what does that translate into dollars and cents? And I would tell you in 24, we have actual debt service expenses of about $5.3 million as a city. In 25, that debt service expense amount would be about 5.4. Why not so much, Matt, if we're issuing all this debt? Because really the debt doesn't hit until 2026, when you begin to pay 2025's debt issuances. And that 2026 debt issuance amount, the actual service expense amount would be 7.5%. So again, not from a standpoint of, if you're looking at our 25 budget with all capital included, we have about 150 million in expenditures proposed. Debt issuance payments on that 150 million would be about 7.5 in 2026. So somewhat reasonable. The revenue observations don't stop there and shouldn't stop there for any of us. Couple of points to remember. Much of the discussion, at least for this committee, is about enterprise operations. Enterprise operations are, as you know, funded by ratepayers. Ratepayers, we're already considering rate adjustments. We've already had rate studies provided to us, which gives us a roadmap for rate adjustments as we move forward. If we're going to move forward with debt issuances, I think there needs to be a realization that we need to stick to those ratepayer and rate study adjustments on a little bit more regular basis than we have had. Nothing that we haven't talked about already, but something that we have to be committed to, I think, as a city. Income tax dollars. So you get an income tax report every month. If you take a look at October's income tax dollars, you can see that there is some concern being raised that we're falling behind in some of the income tax revenue areas. I would tell you to dig deeper into those numbers. In 2023, we had 5 record months throughout 2023 of income tax revenues. In 2024, we've already had 5 record months. But what the numbers don't tell you is in 2023, we actually had an abnormally large estimated income tax from payroll coming into the city. So basically, businesses were paying in way more estimated income tax dollars than they ended up being obligated to do. So you don't have those estimates coming in at that same rate in 24, which is stabilizing the numbers between what the increase should have been in 23 versus what it actually was and what 24's number is. So we actually have a stable income tax revenue area. Now these debt issuances won't be one year down the road or 2 years down the road. They're many years
20
down
years.
the road. So why should I feel comfortable as a council person that Matt Hiscock's crystal ball is any better than anybody else's crystal ball? Well, it's not, first and foremost. But I will tell you, the two largest employers in this city are who? The schools
Schools.
and us.
The city.
Schools aren't going out of business, nor is the city of Wadsworth. You can bet on the two most stable employers in town continuing to be in town for not just next year or 2 years. We're probably going to be here for the life of these issuances. In addition, I can't get into the next group of entities that are on there, but of the next 5 highest employers in town, I will tell you we are knowledgeable of 3 of them expanding, and the other 2 have been here for more than 4 decades and aren't leaving either. So the reality is, I think we have a real stable income tax base, something that's not going away. On the heels of our special meeting we had a couple nights ago, annexation is important. It's important in any community, and I'll tell you why. It's not because of property taxes, which is a primary thing that most folks look at. And while property taxes are important for things near and dear to my heart, the fire and EMS levy and some of those areas, the primary source of revenues that come from property taxes don't exactly help the city. They help other entities that we are partners with in our community. But annexation equals growth. Growth equals improved lands. Improved lands mean increased assessed property values. Why are increased assessed property values important? Because that's what debt capacity is built upon. When you have increased assessed values in land, you have more capacity to issue debt, which keeps your ratings at a solid level. When we invest in ourselves in terms of annexation, smart growth, we're investing in the assessed property values of a community. Our assessed property values of our community are an ability for us to fund the projects that are before you here in 25 and the projects beyond. We know we have a decade's worth of work to do in the water and sewer areas. Assessed valuation, continued smart growth in our community through annexation or others will help us get to the end result that we need. Bonds. Is it a good time to issue bonds? It's the best of times to issue bonds, quite honestly. It's a regular known maxim in the finance world that when interest rates fall, bond prices increase. Guess what's about to happen to interest rates? They're going to come down. They're going to come down. If we go to market with good bonds, favorable bond numbers, favorable interest rates, we're going to see a better return on our dollar on those bond issuances than we would if we wait 6 months, certainly if we wait 12 months. It's a good time. I will tell you, lastly, to take another look at that October income tax report. The October income tax reports will show you where we are in terms of revenue receipts to date. If you follow that along what it shows us through October, it indicates that we're probably going to be in a flat growth number of about $13.8 million, maybe a little less. That puts us, if that follows, if November and December's come in pursuant to trend, we are actually going to be right at our 24 mark if you normalize it. So I think that is the epitome of a stable area in terms of income tax. And if you took out the normalized payments in 23, we're probably ahead of where we had predicted we might be. So I think we have the debt capacity. I think we're in a good shape. I think we see that if you move forward with all of the improvements that are in the 2025 budget, we're not necessarily handicapping ourselves. We're actually putting ourselves in a good position. And really in 2026 is the next discussion point as to what we have to do for the next steps in terms of investment in infrastructure and assets for our community. I think those reports, as I said, are accessible to you. I think Ms. Vick should have an opportunity to weigh in and give you her impressions of that. But a lot of that information, and I purposely made reference to different reports, all come from the Finance Division and are accessible to us. In addition, in the back of your budget books on page 200, You'll find the listing of all of the notes, both internal and external, but that doesn't give you the payment amounts.
No, it doesn't.
The next step in this process is to get the debt issuance or service payments amount, which I reported to you and we have available, but we'll be able to complete that picture for you and go that route. And you'll see that, and I think it's worthy of discussion. When you look at the listing of notes and bonds, there's internal debt in here, there's external debt in there, there's a whole bunch of different avenues. So when you look at that big picture, it's not exactly the same numbers that I proposed to you, but the numbers I proposed to you are exactly out of the Finance Division's documents and reports. So it's all there. You just have a sort of a general summary in that page in that page 200 document. I think that's everything I want to say in terms of the finance abilities there.
Okay, all right, thank you. Go
A
ahead, Mike.
longer view of the finances, the capital finances, has been helpful. And we addressed 25 with the possibilities of some of the things in 26. But the debt issuance is going to last much longer. So what other projects, like the rest of the downtown, would be possibly in there that would affect our capacity and so forth and our ability to pay? Because once we start down that path, we want to complete those things. That's what I was indicating. So how is that going to affect that debt capacity? Because we got a snapshot of now, but the next 3 years. I believe the water tower would be of the water department, is that correct?
Yes.
So it would be in a different category than I'm thinking of. But some of those major capital improvements, and how will that affect us? Because I think that's important, we take a longer view.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent continuing discussion that we should have, but I will make sure that I make a note of it. We talking a lot, and the snapshot that I was giving you a lot was about general obligation debt and debt capacities in those areas, which is really what our financial ratings are about, those types of areas are about. An important caveat for council and the committee to understand is that when you talk about water and sewer projects are exempt from that classification. Yes. And we actually have a much greater capacity to do those types of debt issuance in that form. I would tell you, based upon, Mr. Testa, correct me if I misstated anything from your recollection, based upon a recent discussion with our bond counsel and the municipal advisors, it was told to us that we have almost $70 to $80 million worth of debt capacity on a water and sewer project area. That actually made me feel very good based upon what we know in terms of the work that Gina and Derek and Dana and Christy have done in terms of forecasting what we think SSO projects will cost us, what water treatment plant improvement projects will cost us, and what wastewater treatment plant. The actual municipal advisor told us you're in very good shape as of the moment of that meeting as you move forward down those paths. Those were the heavy lifts for us. Some of the smaller lifts, they're still not small, are some of the other general obligation debt projects that we've been discussing and contemplating. In the end of the day, Mr. Parrish, as I said earlier, and I don't mean to be facetious about this, crystal ball wise, I don't know what the economy is going to do after the election. I don't know what interest rates are exactly going to happen. I read the same information you all read. I don't have any more in-depth or less in-depth items than that. But what I do know is that the city has been very smart with its fiscal decisions. I know council wants to continue those smart fiscal decisions. Administration wants to continue smart fiscal decisions. But we're embarking upon unprecedented expenditures. I know expenditures that haven't even been contemplated in the 17 years I've been with the city. Mr. Copley, you've made some references to as long as you have. We have to do it. We have to do many of these projects. Yes, there are alternatives to doing some of these projects. We can move them down the line if we needed to. You have that control. You have the ability to do that. It is my job to at least advocate and tell you what I'm finding from information and providing you a pathway to do that. But ultimately, it's council's decision to see which direction we go and what our community receives now and what we do later, if you will. Or if we choose not to do something. So it is my job, the way I look at it to you, is to give you as best information as I can to advocate for the departments and for assets and infrastructure, and answer your questions and provide you information so you can make informed decisions.
As you stated earlier, I think it's important, we don't want to push it down the line. That's been the past, and that's caused us some of the issues we have now. So I think that's really important. But as long as we feel comfortable, if you can convince us that we feel comfortable that we have the ability to repay without, especially if in a conservative way, I would be fine. I just want to make sure that we are convinced that we can repay this over the 10 or 15, 20 years, however these bonds are, or loans, so we make good decisions so we don't create problems down in the future.
I think that's extremely reasonable.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for.
I think that's a smart way to approach these decisions.
Yeah.
Testa?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we are talking about the Brickyard in Fund 431. So if you scroll down past the next page to the page after that, and in the next page we're skipping over is largely safety department items or items that were discussed during public ways. So if you look for the 650 fund, telecommunications capital, you'll see that overall, the 2025 ask is about $834,000. The bulk of that, approximately $725,000 of that, is related to the fiber project. The biggest piece of that is the $500,000 budgeted for Node Electronics. Node Electronics are basically all of the pieces, parts that go out and kind of get stacked inside of a cabinet that you'll see in neighborhoods. So the project has about 32 cabinets overall. We've actually completed about 18 of them, but of course we still have a good number to go. So the electronics are typically things like switches that are routing all of the connections behind the scenes. These are the electronics that we previously referred to as kind of the brains of the system. So the largest item here is just the continued purchase of those items for the remaining nodes. If you scroll to the next page, you'll see that we have an item under Fund 660. And towards the bottom third of Fund 660, you'll see an item for about $3 million, and I'll just offer to Gina. It's the sanitary sewer overflow construction. If there are any details or information you want to share on that, Gina.
No, I think the biggest thing in that project is we're trying to continue to remove I&I still at this stage of the game. So still trying to find some direct connections, catch basins tied to the sanitary, downspouts tied to the sanitary, that type of thing, as well as continuing lip lining.
Further down on that same page toward the end of the water section there, you'll see we have approximately close to $2 million budgeted for water meter upgrade project. The bulk of that are the endpoints. So if you think about the water meter is basically connected to an endpoint, and the endpoint is what is transmitting the reads for customer usage. The system that we have now is basically at its expected useful life of about 10 years. The endpoints have been failing at an increasing rate, but more importantly, we can't get replacement endpoints. What we've been able to do just recently is kind of break some of those apart and put in a third-party battery to extend their useful life. But when we run out of endpoints, in essence, the only way to get those reads would be to send somebody out manually to check on those reads. So this was a project that originally was planned for this year. We think we're going to be okay getting through the end of this year, but we delayed it next year, part and parcel just balancing out the expenditures to keep our fund balance at a reasonable level this year, but the expectation is that we'll actually issue an RFP probably in November, go through the process of selecting somebody, would not be choosing somebody and entering into a contract or encumbering that until 2025. And our hope is that really the other equipment here, besides the endpoints, will not be quite as high as we've estimated, but we feel that we've got enough budgeted here to cover us for any potential expenses. But it's really kind of an area where we need to do this, just because the alternative is we kind of step back in time and start doing things manually that are going to require more labor than, what we've been able to experience over the last 10 years as we've automated our collection systems. Scrolling down to the next page, we have $630,000 budgeted for the Bird Street water tower rehab work. As we move down to the page below that, when we're in the Fund 680, this is the electric department funds. We've got $230,000 budgeted for basically replacing 6 of our substation regulators and actually replacing them with regulators that have a higher capacity rating. We have our standard purchase annually of transformers. So one of the things that has resulted from the pandemic of a couple of years ago is that there's an unusually long time lead time associated with transformers, depending on the specific size. It's common that we could be waiting 2 years to get one. So we typically replace transformers on an annual basis, just as part of our normal business operations, to make sure that we've always got a spare in the sizes that we need. So if something goes crazy, we can continue servicing our customers while we wait to get another replacement in down the road. Under the Fund 682, you'll see this is part of the electric funds, but it's the cable plant. Again, if you remember previously when we initially discussed the fiber project, one of the things that we talked about is that the electric department is contributing some of the funding towards this, and the reason for that is basically a lot of what the electric department does relies on the fiber network. So if it weren't for this project, the electric department would be spending electric dollars to upgrade a lot of their network to be able to take advantage of fiber. And again, they're transmitting electrical data and reads over the fiber network. A lot of the connections on the system that we're monitoring, that we can, the reclosers, for example, when a branch falls on a section of electric wire, the systems that basically operate to kind of shut down and open up different circuits to make sure that doesn't cause a widespread outage. All of those things are working on a fiber backbone. So this is just the electric department's contribution. This is a dollar amount that we had previously discussed, so it's not anything new. I just wanted to point it out there. In 683, large purchase item will be replacement of a bucket truck. So we'll be purchasing a larger bucket truck, meaning an 85-foot. This is one of the big ones. Below that, in Fund 690, this is sanitation's capital budget portion. Large purchase expected is a front loader. So this year, for approximately $800,000, we purchased a side loader. Next year, the purchase, a little more than half that cost, would be for the front loader. And then I'll point out toward the bottom there, Mr. Koppel, you had asked about this $11,000 item that did not have a description, and I had made a mistake there in that I put the description for this item on a different line item, which is why it didn't appear next to this. But the $11,000 is basically for a diesel laptop scan tool that's basically used for diagnostic purposes. So that's what that $11,000 is for. And that takes us really to the bottom of the items I wanted to highlight, so I would entertain any questions that anyone has.
I have one, the 50,000 for carts. Is it due to, on sanitation, is it due to expansion or replacement?
It's typically our annual replacement.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I have. I don't.
Any questions or anything?
Just like some time to process it.
Yep, go through everything. All right,
So, Mr. Chairman, I will just mention that as we move into November, we'll transition and be going over the operating budgets. So our next Public Service Committee meeting will be reviewing the standard budget book pages, the ones with the colorful bar charts and all of that, as we go through the operating requests of public service departments for 2025.
okay, all right. Anything else, Mr. Williams?
No.
All right, well, then that next meeting then is November the 18th, 2024, here at 5:30 in council chambers. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
We are adjourned.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.